Welcome to the Crazy Cool Family Podcast with Don and Suzanne Manning.
A podcast where we share with you great insights about everything family from over 30 years of parenting 7 kids and over a decade of equipping parents through our Crazy Cool Family ministry.
So let us inspire and equip you to build your best family.
Well, welcome to episode number 301. We celebrated episode 300 last week, so we're just hungover now.
Cleaning up all that imaginary confetti.
If you don't know why we said that, you have to listen to last week's podcast to see. But we're moving in from, if you're listening to this in the right time, then we're moving from spring into summer, kind of
end of May.
Graduation season. Hopefully, we have actually 2 graduating, this one from high school, one from college. So we are continuing to move on to get them off the payroll, is what I keep saying. But we thought we would take a break. We've been doing a lot of different relational lines. We thought
parent to kid. We've been talking about the parent to kid, how to crazy cool parent that.
Thought we'd just take a break and talk about marriage for a little bit.
Well, and specifically, we're going to talk about parenting with your teammate. And so we're still going to be talking a little bit about parenting, but we're going to focus on, like Don said, that marriage line, your teammate, your spouse. How's it going? How are you doing? How are you, what's it look like as the seasons change? And so let's talk about that a little bit.
If you want to go back to some other podcasts, this will be in the show notes as well, but we got several on marriage, but we've just 3 that we highlighted in particular. Number 167, we're fighting for marriage. Number 227 is your marriage surviving or thriving. Those are both guest podcasts. And then episode number 241, loving on your marriage, which probably has some of the things that we're going to talk about today. Some we may overlap with some things today in that one. That was a great podcast. Which that means this one's going to be a great one too. So I think this is a great topic because I don't think that parents talk about parenting enough. What I mean by that, and we'll dig into it a little bit, I think, and they don't do it well because so often we avoid the discussions because we think, oh, I'm not talking about that with my spouse because I don't get a good reaction. It never works well. It causes a fight, and so we don't talk about it. Would you agree with that, Suzanne?
Oh, for sure, yes, because most of the time as parents, we come at a situation from 2 different perspectives, and it feels like it's harder to understand the husband or the wife's perspective than it is to just solve the situation on your own with a kid.
Or we think that we don't want to step on their toes, or, they're not going to change, or all the things that happen. And so I think a lot of times we don't check in on our spouse about parenting when those can be some of the most valuable family discussions you can have. And if if you choose to do them and you do them well, and they're, which is how you approach it as well as how you receive it, then oh my goodness, it can bring about such change in your family and also bring about a unified spirit in your home, in your marriage, which so often will help your kids to want to be on the same team as well.
Yeah. And so as I look back over our marriage, I would say that this is kind of complicated, but there were a lot of aspects that maybe we didn't parent together, but there were a lot that we did. And I remember you would come home from work and we would get through the evening and put the kids to bed or whatever. And then our pillow talk, if you will, when we would go to bed together would be about the kids. And I would download, this kid did this today and this kid did this and this kid said this and this was this. And I would get you up to speed and so that you were included in what was going on. And kudos to you for listening and for taking it in and knowing that was valuable, important, that I could unload all that. I unloaded my work of the day, if you will. But what it did too was that it allowed you to have a relationship with the kids and be in the know. So then the next day when you talk to them, you could say, hey, mom said that you did this on your spelling test or you did that. And so you knew things. And so there was a unity that I do feel like that we did have when we had discussions about our kids, about what they were doing, about what they were experiencing so that you could experience it along with them.
Yeah, Psalm 133:1 says, "How good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity." Unity is something that is desired by God for our family. And when there is unity between the husband and the wife, the unity bleeds out into the family. Mm-hmm. When there is disunity, on the other hand, even though the kids may not be directly impacted by it, there is a spirit of disunity in the home, and therefore there will be it will bleed out into the kids as well. So how do you have, so often, how do you have unity in the marriage when you've got these two different people, two different parenting styles? We hear it so often. My husband just won't listen to me, or my wife just, she's, sometimes it may be something like, well, she just doesn't discipline him. I always have to do all the discipline, or, and we just live with these frustrations. How do you start these discussions, and how do you check in with your spouse, and how did we get from, we didn't know what we were doing when we started.
And I think that so once again, we talked about it at bedtime. We talked about the relationships, which I think was unifying for sure. But there was many times in the moment that we would see a situation and we would approach it very differently. And so let's say the child does, we have a story of Molly when she was little bitty and she took a shampoo bottle and she's dumping it upside down. Unacceptable, waste, bad, And so Don comes in and he's like, "What are you doing? Don't do that." And I was like, "Okay, wait a minute. She's just 2 or she's 1. I don't remember how old she was. She was little, and she just is, I don't think she's being mean. I don't think she's being destructive. I think she's just awed by it because she's never before seen anything like that happen. And so what if we approached it in a different way?" And so him and I came about the situation radically differently.
And that was early in our parenting too. And so often, we talk so much about parents becoming learners. We sought we didn't know what we were doing. And so a lot of times, one of the things that somebody taught us was, don't get onto your spouse in the moment of parenting.
Right.
Unless they're doing something just egregiously wrong.
Yeah.
They're just, yelling and shaking the kid or something, and you got to say, "Hey, intervene." But, and that did happen a couple of times with us. Where we had to say, "Hey, we're going to stop this,"
Yeah, let's not do this anymore.
Mom's out of control or dad's out of control. We're going to, but that's the rare occasion of, so one of the things that we were taught is that let the parent do what they're going to do and then talk about it in private.
Yeah. And know that it can be undone. If it becomes okay, so what's really bad is if the situation comes up and one parent's doing it one way and the other parent is radically disagreeing. If the other parent that's disagreeing waits till it's finished, gets on the other side of it, talks to the parent, and then the parent that was in charge of the situation realizes, "Yeah, you're right. That was dumb. I shouldn't have done it that way." They can go back and apologize to the kid. They can restore the relationship and all is good. If, though, the parent is in the middle of the situation, the other parent comes in and they start railing on the parent too, now you've got both parents are mad at each other. The fight, the issue that was between the parent and the child has now become between the two parents, which then is very unsettling for the child because
that child thinks they caused it,
and they did. They didn't at all, but their actions created this situation, so therefore they can't help but think I caused this, and so it's just not a very safe and secure place to put your child. And so we just encourage you parents to go ahead and swallow that pride that you want to say something to the parent and say something afterwards. Now, if it's a situation where you feel like that you guys are radically off and you're constantly disagreeing with each other, then create a safe word. Create something that you're going to say, like sassafras in the middle of a situation, and the parent that's doing the parenting right now hears the word sassafras and says, "Okay, I might need to rethink how I'm parenting." And then the parent who sees it and wants it to be changed, that's all you get to say. You don't get to say anything else. And then that can help maybe trigger the parent that's kind of riled up to calm down a little bit and reevaluate.
But so often, if both, this is a great conversation to have on a date night when you're calm. Is to say that
after you've had something yummy to drink, eat, both.
If we, then you'd say, "Hey, together we want to agree that we want to create a safe place to talk about parenting."
Yes.
Then if if both spouses believe that they have a safe place to talk. Because let's face it, both of you want the best for your kids. I mean, we
Neither of you want your kid to be a brat.
Yeah,
Neither of you kid want your kid to be selfish.
Yeah.
You don't. There's qualities in your child that you do not want them to have.
And so when you talk to each other and you say, hey, in order to do that, we believe that we need to have a safe place to talk about parenting issues. And we could also, another thing that was radically different for me is I always thought that, and Suzanne thought the same way, that we needed to, that the talk needed to be that we would win. One of us would win and one of us would lose in terms of methods. Because either she needed to do my method or I needed to do her method. And what we found is that, wow, we could accomplish the same things with different methods because we're two different people and we might approach things two different ways. That was a big change for me, and it helped us to have better conversations because now it wasn't like, well, Suzanne, if you would just be more organized, you would, you know, you wouldn't have the problems that you're having, and it becomes this condescending, this tone of voice of, if you just would do it this way, then everything would be okay. Or if, she would say to me, if you could just see that, if you could just, whatever it was. And I'm like, so now I feel like a third grader, and so, but that's what being safe is all about, is being able to, how do you have conversations that are more engaging? Well, man, what do you think we should do about that? That's how many times, did we ask each other that question over time as, after we learned some things? Well, what do you think about that?
That's huge. Instead of, yes, I agree, to ask, what do you think? Ask. You do want their opinion. You want their insight. And then, okay, help me understand why you want to do it that way, or let me, because we very much have an idea of why we want to do it that way. And so the other person just doesn't understand it.
Yeah. I mean, think about that. What's the objective? What is the objective of what they're doing? So often I would see Suzanne do something and be like, that's dumb. Why she's not going to get there with that. But in reality, when I ask her about it, she's like, oh, but if I do this, then they're going to do that. And I think this is going to be there. I'm like, oh, that's kind of smart.
That works.
maybe I should try, but sometimes I might have a really, I said, man, there's no way I could do that. But sometimes I would say, yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe I could do that. And so having a safe place takes away some of the heavy-handedness of parent discussions and check-ins.
Yeah, and a couple things that a couple things I would encourage you to do is I would encourage you to be grateful for your spouse. If there's like some rough waters, if you will, that you've gotten into fights over parenting and there's not as much unity there as you'd like to be, gratefulness is a huge way to diffuse the conflict, the tension, and build that unity. Is to just say, hey, I think you're a great dad. I think you're an amazing mom. I am so grateful that you're spending so many hours with our kids. I love it that you're coaching our kids sporting events. You realize they're so excited when you come home. They look forward to daddy coming home every day. Find 2 or 3 or 4 things that you can say that encourages that role that they're playing as the father or the mother.
Well, and another way that's really cool, and this is the way we came up with our family dashboard, is rather than talk about parenting methods, so often we talked about the relational lines and the health of the child.
Yeah.
So, let's say that you've got a 5-year-old. Well, rather than talk about how you're parenting versus I'm parenting the child, what if we talk about, hey, let's say his name's Ryan. How do you think Ryan's doing? Well, Ryan is fearful. Okay. He's got great energy, but man, he gets fearful sometimes. Why do you think that is? When you're talking, or, what's your relationship with Ryan like? Yeah. Well, man, he annoys the heck out of me when he does this. I know, isn't that, what can we do about that? How are we going to approach that? And now it's like you both get on the same team with the goal of helping Ryan be his best,
Right.
versus worried about what you're doing to Ryan versus what I'm doing, and all the things. Talking about the relationships is really, maybe you've got Ryan's relationship with Emma, his sister, and you're talking about how they're interacting together and how, wow, what could we do? Man, I think that maybe if I just took Ryan out on a date.
Yeah.
And we did this. Oh man, that's a great idea. You start, and it changes those check-ins in that regard. When you look at our family dashboard, those relational lines help you to have different kind of check-in conversations.
That's good. And you're not focusing on what each other's doing wrong. You're focusing on what's the situation is that the child's presenting to you, so that you can, in a unified teammate manner, work together on that.
Well, and so often what that would do, those unifying, those check-in conversations and doesn't have to be at night. It could be on a date night. Could be when you come home from work. Everybody's got different methods to do it. But a lot of times then it stops the children being able to triangulate you.
Yeah.
So, for example, the kid may say, well, Mom would let me do that. You know what, man, I talked with Mom about that. And I'm going to bet I know that she would say no to that. You want to go check with her? Let's go check with her and see what she says. And you go back to her and say, hey, I need, Ryan to do this. And he's saying you would let him do that. What do you think about that? No, you need to do what your dad says.
Right.
And
right.
And that stops the triangulation so much of being able to manipulate and the kids being able to cause disunity in the home.
Yep, a unified team. You got to present that to your kids. And reality is they want that more than anything else. While it might appear that they are working hard to divide and conquer you as parents, they get the most confidence and security and safety in that marriage line being strong and you guys being on the same page. They're wired to test their boundaries, and that's a good thing. We want them to do that. That's what a world changer does. It tests boundaries. But when it comes to their parents and their parenting style being on the same page, they need you to do that. They need us as their parents to be fighting for them, not against them and not against our spouse.
And so a little bit of a subject change, but related, and because I really want to ask you this because it's come a long way in our marriage and in our parenting discussions. But there's a question there that says, how do you check in on your spouse without them feeling judged or attacked? And so I think we've come a long way in this, in that we used to begin conversations and when I would struggle with, something that you were doing, sometimes that didn't go well, and sometimes, and it was both of us in terms of the way I approached it and the way you received it. What would you say has changed though over time and how we've handled that type of, because I know there's a lot of marriages out there, a lot of parenting situations where spouses feel attacked and they feel judged and they feel like that. I know there's a lot of men I talk to, like, I don't ever do anything right.
Right.
And so therefore I just don't try.
Yeah.
And the wife says, like, why don't you try more? It's like, because I don't ever do it right.
Right.
No matter what I do, it's never what you want me to do. And, and so, or, husbands or, talk down to their wives or whatever. What would you say happened in our marriage and our parenting discussions over time?
Yeah, I think that one of the bottom line is believing that we are for each other, believing that we're on the same side, we're on each other's side. I think that for so many years it felt like it was a competition. It was you get your way or I get my way. And I think that as we synced up, if you will, and realized and believed, you want the best for me. You want me to succeed. You want me to win. You want me to succeed and win over you succeeding and winning. I mean, you want me to have the best experience I'm going to have with my children all day long or with whatever it is, and believing that. And I think for many, many years, I did not believe that. And so I just see it as, see marriages out there. The enemy, once again, he wants to kill, steal, and destroy. And he's going to do that by dividing and conquering. And so he wants us to believe that our spouse is not for us. that our spouse has their own agenda, their own plan, their own desire to do it their own way, and they're not willing to see it from your perspective. And therefore, that makes you on guard, build a wall, and not willing to see it from their perspective. And so if we can just change that, and I think that we did that. We did a lot of work. We worked on that for several years on believing, oh, Don's for me. That's not true. What the enemy's telling me is not true. Don wants what's best for me. He wants what's best for our family. And so that's not true. And so I had to tell myself over and over again and believe that. So that's what I would say. What would you say?
Well, I think that so often when I would be when we were critical of each other, I think that so often we would sometimes it wasn't even about us. It was about the circumstances, or it was about something else. And a lot of times I found that my interpretation of situations was harsher than it really was.
Yeah.
And so some of that was just releasing that and not doing my best to not be defensive. And also another thing that really helped, I think, our marriage is and conversations about parenting was to become more encouraging.
Right.
I think so often we don't say to our spouse, man, I am super grateful that, you're there every day for our kids.
Right.
I'm super grateful for the things that how you love so well, and you ask questions. I wish I want to do that better. And I mean, we talk about it with our kids, but it also works with our spouse. That it just speaks.
Actually, works with everybody.
and it speaks life into them, and it speaks life into the relationship. Where that then if we have to come back and say, I'm concerned about this, or I don't understand this, or whatever, then we're dealing from a place of safety versus a place of continual criticism.
Yeah, I love that. And so we talked about that gratefulness and encouragement to bring more unity, also gratefulness and encouragement to undo that feeling of being judged and attacked. They really are superpowers. They really, really are. And if you take nothing else away from this podcast, then take away, I'm going to encourage my spouse, and I'm going to not only feel gratefulness, see gratefulness, but I'm going to share gratefulness with them. It's gonna change your parenting with your spouse. It's gonna change interacting with them as a teammate in this role of being a parent.
Yeah. I also think that marriages, we talk at Crazy Cool Family about littles, middles, and bigs. We talk about it in kids. But we also really have marriages, that are like that. They grow over time. And
we've always somebody's told us. I don't remember who taught it to us. That they said if you will treat your 1-year-old marriage like you would a 1-year-old, they don't know much, And if you teach your 5-year-old marriage like a 5-year-old,
your marriage, not your spouse.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Don't do that. That's wow. But if you just if you're tender like that with it, 1-year-old needs a lot of attention. A new marriage needs a lot of attention. A 5-year-old marriage is a little bit more independent. You don't have to be together all the time. And then we're in a big marriage. We're in an ancient marriage, and we just like with your like with our adult kids, we could go days without talking to them. Now we don't go days without talking to each other in marriage, but we do have times where you're busy all day and I'm busy all day, and we're fine with that. And It's not like it was the first 5 years when we needed to check in often.
Yeah. And I think that if you're struggling in the first few years, if you got a little marriage and you're struggling, remember that 2-year-old throws fits, and so it's like,
so good.
You're learning emotional, you're learning that emotional intelligence, if you will, in your marriage, just like a 2-year-old does or a 5-year-old does. And so
they just need to be taken out to dinner. They need to be hugged.
Yeah. And understanding that, so that another thing, if you have a little marriage, if you're in the first years, don't dig yourself holes. So often they don't get help, or they're isolated and they don't get help. They're not making those conversations. They're not talking. That's why we love people being in church, being in small groups and things like that, because you get to see other people, but you also get to see yourselves. And that way you avoid the trap of digging yourself a hole that becomes hard to get out of.
Oh, and I'm so glad you said that. The word that came to mind as you were saying that is in that littles and middles in that marriage season, expectations. Eat your lunch. You expect your spouse to be the prince and knight in shining armor, and to know all your thoughts and feelings, and to bring fresh flowers home every day, and to clean everything. Just like you might expect your 1-year-old to know what's in that cabinet. Why do they keep cleaning out the cabinet? And why do they throw their food on the floor? And we have these expectations for our 1-year-olds that are unrealistic. And the same thing is true with our marriages. And so what would that look like if you're in that marriage and you're in a tough spot? What expectations have you put on it that do not need to be there?
Yeah. And then as you get older, it becomes a potential, just like with middles and teenagers, we start to separate from our parents, there is health in that, like Suzanne was saying, but then we also have to turn around and pay attention to it, because so often with the busyness of life, when the grade schoolers are in sports and all the activities begin, it becomes like roommates.
Like, who are you again? Yeah. What do I know you?
Paying attention to that marriage and doing those follow-ups and so often, and it's okay, parents. I know we also want to talk about other things than kids. Sometimes it feels like that's all we talk about is kids, but it's also good. God gave us kids for a reason. They're a part of our lives. They're a part of our marriages. They're a part of our family. And so having those discussions can be super beneficial as the marriage gets older, and being able to say, wow, we need to pay attention to each other. Because it is, there may be other things you have in common, but kids are certainly one thing you have in common.
Yes.
And so you can always use that. If handled well, kids become a way to unify your marriage as well as your family.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what I want to end with. Kind of where we started is what happens when you have these connect points. When you are having marriage connect points, is what you're doing is you're building unity in your marriage and in your parenting, which is going to build unity in your family, and unity of all the diverse resources and all the different people in your family pays great, great dividends in the long term.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that word connect, because that's our crazy cool concept. We were just talking about the crazy cool concept each week, a CCC, and it's crazy cool connection and building that connection. And so to be like super, super practical, just think about some things that you can do in this season of life, wherever that is. If you're in a little season, middle season, ancient, a big season, what can you do to invest in your marriage, invest in your teammate when it comes to parenting? And so just some super practical things is to choose each other over your kids. Choose to, super simple, hold hands in the front seat of the car. If you're sitting there together, sit in the front seat together. Or one of the things we would do is if we would go to church, we would choose to sit by each other. A lot of parents book in their kids, to contain them, but we would choose to sit together. Or at a restaurant, we would choose to sit either right across from each other or side by side, and not on opposite ends of the table, so that we could have a connection and a conversation.
Yeah, if you've been around Crazy Cool Family, you know that we tell you to go to bed together.
Yes.
And we have a lot of parents, a lot of husbands and wives. Well, I'm an early riser. She's make a commitment at least a few days a week.
Yeah.
You go to bed together, because so many good things, like sex for one thing. But so many good things happens when you go to bed together. You have time for conversations and.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say, that it's valuable. I would say 4 nights a week, choose to go to bed together. Now, if there's 3 that you want to have other things to do, that's fine. But the reason is because with that going to bed together, you create an opportunity to have what I call as pillow talk. And that's just the most intimate, ultimate conversation connection. I mean, I pray for when all of my children...
Never going to do that with anybody else.
Exactly. And so with all of my children, as they get married, as they got on the other back end of college, and they're talking to me, and we're having these conversations, and they're evolving into conversations that need to be talked with a spouse, as a pillow talk. Then I start praying, it's time for them to have a spouse. It's time for them to have a spouse.
Although We just had our grandkids spend the night this weekend, and the 6-year-old slept in my place in the bed, so he got to have the pillow talk with my wife for a couple nights.
And we did.
I was
not as interesting.
I was not happy about that. So it does change every once in a while. You got to give it up, and then we went back. After a couple of nights, we reconnected. So hey, so glad you're with us, parents, and so glad you are fighting the fight for family. So glad you're fighting for your marriage, because it's worth it. Suzanne said last podcast that family's worth it. Marriage is worth it. A great marriage is something you have to fight for. Suzanne and I always say, in the family dashboard, it's the hardest line we fought for. We have fought for our marriage, and it's worked. I mean, we have it's stronger than it's ever been at 33 years, and so there's always hope. There's always good that can come out of your marriage. Especially if we have two spouses that love the Lord, and we hope that we've encouraged you today to have some conversations and some check-ins on parenting, check-ins as we maybe think about, hey, what's the summer look like? And what are we going to do? What are some things we'd like to see when school starts with our family, and make some goals for this summer, see what happens. Thanks for playing. And as always, go be crazy, crazycoolfamily.com.